I got into the Yakuza franchise kind of late. I started with Kiwami. I remember being so excited when Kiwami 2 came out. I beat it in a couple of weeks and got sad that now I'm going to have to wait years for Kiwami 3 to come out. Unfortunately, we never got Kiwami 3. Instead, we got Yakuza 3, 4, and 5 remastered. As you'll see, the remaster actually did a lot of damage to Yakuza 3 overall, and when I first played through 3 I hated it. It was the only Yakuza game I actually completely did not like. But I finally went back and completed it, and it's definitely rough. But overall, I have a newfound respect for this game, and I will continue to wait on Kiwami 3 to come, someday. Even before I completed my first Yakuza game, I knew I wanted to talk about Yakuza 3. I'm not saying the story is completely awful, but starting the way it did, I don't think there was any way I was going to like this game. It immediately put such an awful, terrible taste in my mouth that the rest of the game seemed sour. One of the strongest characters in the entire series is Sayama. If you haven't played Yakuza 1 or 2, I'm going to be spoiling them as well as Yakuza 3. I can't explain why I don't like this story without getting into 1 and 2's story. Kiryu did 10 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. His oath brother tried to kill him and ultimately died. The love of his life died in front of him. The man he called father not only died, but revealed he killed Kiryu's parents. Kiryu is trying to leave the Yakuza lifestyle, but he keeps getting pulled back in. The one silver lining through this series, and Kiryu's life, is Haruka, basically his daughter, and I am shocked she made it through the series. So finally, Kiryu forms a connection with someone, he finally gets a girlfriend, and within the first 5 minutes of this game, she just leaves.
I just left.
That seems too easy.
I just left.
She tells Kiryu she wants to go to America to become a detective. This is like a giant middle finger to fans of the series. Also, fuck Kiryu, he doesn't deserve happiness. And seeing as how Sayama cared deeply for Haruka as well, fuck Haruka too, she doesn't deserve a mom. Not only that, this is terrible writing. This is the moment that made me say, okay, the overall stories of the Yakuza series don't matter, because they have no idea what they're doing. Up until this point, I had played 0, Kiwami, and Kiwami 2. All pretty good stories that were fairly consistent. The reason why I say this is terrible writing is because Sayama loved Kiryu by the end of 2. She wouldn't have just left him. Oh, well maybe she loves him, but she was willing to leave him. She literally chose to die and stay with Kiryu rather than leave him and live. She would rather die than leave him. At the end of 2, a bomb is about to blow up the Millennium Tower, with Kiryu and Sayama on top. Kiryu got shot and he's too weak to escape. He tells Sayama to leave, and she decides to stay with Kiryu and die with him. Her only concern about dying with Kiryu is that they're leaving Haruka behind. The only thing she cares about is Haruka and Kiryu, and she cares about Kiryu more than Haruka. So she's willing to fucking die with him. Yet I'm supposed to believe that she just decides, nah bro, I'm gonna head out. The writing in this expects that you either never played Yakuza 2, or they just treat you like you're stupid. I remember when I first played 3, I literally stopped playing once Sayama said she wanted to leave to go to America to look up if it was a fluke and see when she comes back to the series. And that's just it. She doesn't come back, ever again. You find out in a later game that Sayama is a great detective in America and is dating someone else now. Fuck you, game. No wonder Kiryu never dates anyone. The love of his life fucking dies in front of him, and the other love of his life is willing to die with him, and then just changes her mind overnight and fucking leaves. I read somewhere, I don't know how true it is, that the reason they wrote Sayama out of 3 is because they didn't know what to do with her. And if so, that's so dumb. Well, she's a cop for starters, so that's a pretty easy way to write her into the story. If they were worried about Kiryu having a girlfriend, they managed to write a story around him managing an orphanage, but a girlfriend was just too much to handle. I think this is the worst decision they've made in the entire series, other than killing Ryuji. I'd go through Catfight all over again just to get a redo on 3's story. Instead of thinking, we don't know what to do with her, they should have said, Kiryu has a girlfriend now and she's a cop. Think about all the things we can do with her.
That's why I'll never forgive the Japanese!
Oh, your heart is in America? Funny how you never mentioned that before. Great writing.
So that was a fucking lie.
Dude, I just went on a whole ass rant and we're not even 15 minutes into the story. But I hope from what I said you can understand that the writers for this one are not the most capable. So Sayama is technically in this game. She sends you completion rewards. The game takes place pretty immediately after 2. So Sayama immediately has a change of heart, which is dumb, but Kiryu is wrapping things up in Kamurocho because he doesn't plan on coming back. He enlists Majima to watch over Daigo, and of course this leads to a fight. Kiryu wins and they have a nice little scene on the roof. And I do enjoy this moment from the game, so it's not all bad. Then we see that Kiryu is taking a month to cut onions and starts to get bullied by a little kid. Luckily Haruka's there to protect him. Kiryu started his own orphanage in Okinawa, following Kazuma's footsteps. Speaking of Kazuma, once the plot actually happens, it's revealed someone that looks just like Kazuma, who died in the first game, shot Daigo and Nakahara. Nakahara is the leader of the local Yakuza in Okinawa. This Kazuma lookalike wants the plot of land where Kiryu's orphanage is for some military expansion deal. It'll make the Yakuza a lot of money, and the government is also interested in it, but both Daigo and Nakahara are not on board because taking that land would mean betraying Kiryu. Through many twists and turns, it's revealed the military expansion was all a ruse to lure out Black Monday, an illegal arms trading group. Kazuma is actually Kiryu's adopted dad's twin brother, and he works for the CIA. And Kazuma's partner is actually Andre Richardson, the leader of Black Monday, unbeknownst to Kazuma. After Daigo is shot, he's put into a coma, so 3 of the Tojo clan members are competing for leadership, and Mine rises to the top. The other 2 are kind of lame. One is a weird sex pervert and the other is kind of generic, but they're not too important to the overall story. Mine is the big bad, and while I do like Mine, I'll be honest, he was incredibly forgettable. I would have liked a more focused story with more emphasis on Mine. Mine only has a few scenes in the whole game. Most of it he's clearly hiding something, so he just acts reserved. By the time he takes the front stage, the game's almost over. I don't like Mine, which I guess means he's an effective villain.
生きるお前らを見るとな、壊してやりたくなるんだよ。まあ、自分が行ってる偽善に気づかない桐生さんが悪い。お前たちはある意味、あの人の被害者なのかもしれないな。
Hey, only Kiryu can do that. He ends up redeeming himself at the end, and of course they're on a rooftop, and he grabs Andre Richardson and jumps off the roof to save the day.
What the fuck?
So that's a very quick and dirty rundown of the plot. I missed a lot of details, but too long didn't read is everyone wants Kiryu's land. Mine is the bad guy, but Andre Richardson is the real bad guy. Now, on to the more minute details I want to complain about. For starters, I love that Kiryu started an orphanage and all his interactions with the children are fine, but why was this a part of the main story? You start off in Kamurocho fighting thugs and Majima, and immediately you get thrust into watching children at an orphanage. It's not just that these parts of the story are boring, especially by comparison, but it requires so much busy work. One of the girls loses her money, so Kiryu decides to have a family meeting and gathers everyone in the kitchen. You then have to walk around the orphanage and find and talk to every kid to get them to go to the kitchen. I thought I went everywhere and walked around for quite a while before I realized the girl who got her money stolen doesn't automatically go to the kitchen. You have to talk to her a second time. Okay, fine, my bad. I still was missing another kid, so after looking it up, there's another hallway I completely missed with a laundry room where the girl is. You can say I'm just a dummy poo-poo head for not knowing where to go, but I think a big reason I got lost so much is because I just didn't care about rounding the kids up. I wanted to get through it as quick as possible, so of course I missed easy stuff. The orphanage chapters are by far the longest chapters of the game, and you feel every second of it. The game finally gets going, you meet local Yakuza including Rikia, and the game grinds to another halt because the kids want you to catch a dog.
Man, fuck them kids!
You have to chase the dog around, give him food, and finally get him a ball. You should already have a ball because it's part of crafting material, but the dog doesn't want that ball. He's a fancy dog. He wants a baseball, so you have to walk all the way back to the orphanage to borrow a baseball from one of the kids. This is so boring and monotonous. Finally, in Chapter 9, you get in a big fight with a bunch of security. It seems like everything is coming to a head. You barely escape and everything is going down. The next chapter is almost entirely orphanage missions, and I think it's the longest chapter in the game. You are at the end of the game, and everything just grinds to a halt so you can deal with these kids' problems. Okay, this one gets a pass. I know I really haven't brought up Rikia, but he has a really important side story with cutscenes where he gets his back tattoo finished by Kiryu's tattoo artist. That's just side content that you can very easily miss. Finding out who took the girl's money? Oh, that's way too important to miss. That's gotta be in the main story. If all the orphanage stuff was just side content, I wouldn't have minded. Or if it wasn't so monotonous, like instead of having to gather all the children for a meeting, how about you just go to the kitchen and have a meeting? Don't get me wrong, the orphanage and the children are an important part of Yakuza, but these missions in 3 absolutely sucked. and ruined the flow of the game, in my opinion. So at a certain point, they destroy the orphanage. Yes! No more boring ass missions! So like I said, Kiryu makes friends with the local Yakuza. Nakahara is their leader, and he's pretty cool. He takes care of a mute girl, and he has a pretty satisfying conclusion to his story.
これくらいでへたばっちまうなんてお互い年だな。
一緒にするな。
酒。お前喋れるように。
So I'm actually really impressed. They created a new character and they don't kill him off, and he just never shows up in another Yakuza game. This really was the black sheep of the Yakuza franchise. Other than the orphanage, the sequels act like this game never existed. Mikio is another member of the local Yakuza, and he has a side story related to him, but other than that, there's not much to say about him. He survives, but again, they act like he never existed in the sequels. Finally, there's Rikiya. Everyone loves Rikiya, so I'm sorry for what I'm about to say. Rikiya was always created as a character that's going to die.
だからここは兄貴しか収められねえと。
ちょっと待て。
はい？
さっきから聞いていると、俺のことを兄貴兄貴って何言ってるんだ。
だって兄貴は兄貴じゃないですか。
お前は流動一家の若頭だろう。俺はお前の兄貴分でも何でもない。
まあその話はいいとして。
よくない。お前みたいなやつに兄貴と呼ばれたら、うちの子供たちに悪影響だろうが。
別にいいじゃないですか。俺は兄貴の強さと男気に惚れたんです。俺にとって兄貴は兄貴なんです。じゃあシモン、車回してきますんでお願いします。兄貴。
This moment right here is the moment I knew he was going to die. Kiwami ended with Kiryu's best friend, his love interest, and pretty much everyone else other than Haruka dying. 2 ended with Terada and Ryuji dying. The only one to survive is Sayama, and 3 starts by writing her off, so I knew the deal by now. Someone has to die to have a dramatic moment. They're not going to kill Haruka, so as soon as they introduced this character, I knew right away he was going to die at the end. Say what you will about Yakuza 7, at least they didn't have to kill everyone off to make you feel something. Kiryu and Rikiya start off as enemies. Kiryu beats him up, and literally the next day, Rikiya is calling Kiryu Aniki. Come on, did anyone not see this coming? Also, look at how the other side story ends.
沖縄に帰ろう。夏美、お前の心配事は俺が何とかしてやる。だからもう沖縄に帰ろう。俺、桐生の兄貴と一緒にこっちでやることがあるから、それが全て済んだら迎えに来るから。
Rikiya is like, I'm totally gonna live happily ever after. I just have one more thing to do. Hopefully nothing bad will happen to me. Damn it! He was one day from retirement! Like, did anyone not see this coming? They made it pretty obvious, especially with their track record, that he was only created to die and make Kiryu sad. Also, at the beginning of the game, it shows that Kiryu and Rikiya are best buds, and Rikiya is like family at the orphanage. So I was looking forward to seeing how Kiryu and Rikiya's relationship would grow, and it doesn't show it at all. Like I said, Rikiya starts calling Kiryu Aniki right away. Kiryu helps Nakahara get his adopted daughter back, and then the story jumps forward a year, but it never really shows their relationship growing. So to me, it just felt forced. So I really didn't buy that Kiryu and Rikiya were that close. I know a lot of people consider Rikiya's death scene to be the most emotional in the series, but to me it felt really cheap and unearned. It doesn't make any sense for Kiryu to react like this.
すみません。
力也。おい、力也。おい、お前何勝手に死んでんだよ。おい、俺許さねえぞ。おい、力也。一応しろ、力也。
I guess he won't be in Yakuza 8. Let me illustrate my point. Here's Kiryu reacting to his adoptive father dying.
ひまわりは俺が親殺した子供のための施設。いいんだおやさん。俺にとっちゃおやさんが本当の親父でした。
Wow, pretty emotional stuff, but he kept it together. Here's his reaction when Nishiki dies. This is his oath brother. He's probably closer to Nishiki than any other man on the planet. He's known Nishiki his whole life.
Nishiki!
He doesn't react at all. He doesn't really have time to. The love of his life, Yumi, is dying.
逃げたら私みたいに幸せ逃がしちゃうから。絶対に逃げちゃダメ。
Wow, that's sad, but he didn't even cry. He's clearly upset, but he was able to hold it in. You know what? Maybe that's unfair. That's a different game altogether. Let's not discuss the other games. Another person Kiryu grew up with is Kashiwagi. Kashiwagi is awesome, and he's in every other Yakuza game before this. He's been a huge help to Kiryu and has treated him like family. This game killed him off for no fucking reason, like he was an afterthought. So, how does Kiryu react to Kashiwagi dying, someone he's known pretty much his entire life?
柏木さん、柏木さん。
Wow, he got over that pretty quick. And this is his reaction to Rikiya dying.
力也。おい、力也。おい、お前何勝手に死んでんだよ。おい、俺許さねえぞ。おい、力也。一応しろ、力也。
This is not Kiryu. All I can think watching the scene is this makes no sense. Why is he more sad about someone dying he's known a year than his oath brother, the love of his life, his father, and Kashiwagi? I don't buy this scene at all and it doesn't feel earned.
おとなしくしてるわけにはいかないんだ。俺だって一人前の男になりたいんだ。
気持ちはわかる。だが今じゃないはずだ。死ぬと分かってて戦うのが一人前の男ってわけじゃない。男なら命を張る場面はきっと来る。お前にその時が来たら 思い切りやればいい。今は俺を信じろ。
To me, he does die a pointless death. This moment doesn't make sense, it's written poorly, it's out of character, and the series would have been far better off if Rikia had survived and been in the other games. Think about how cool it would have been if Rikia was a playable character in 4. But they had no interest in that. They just wanted a character they could kill off for a cheap grab at an emotional moment. I will say, I know I'm in the minority on that, and lots of people love that moment, but it just doesn't make any sense to me. I've heard people defend it by saying, well, Kiryu was so emotionally wrecked from all the other deaths that this is what broke him. Cool. It would have been nice if they showed that anywhere else in the game. That was 100% not the writer's intention with this scene. If it was, they would have at least mentioned it, or shown Kiryu struggling with his past losses. Kiwami too even did that, mainly because it was actually well written.
親殺したのは俺なんだ。
一夜でもいい、一目でもいいからもう一回カズマに会いたかった。その夢が叶ったの。
こんな奴に好きにさせてたまるかよ。最後のけじめくらい俺につけさせろ。
やめろ。やめるんだ。錦
夢か。
Also, this isn't just a complaint of 3, it happens in every Yakuza. This is just when I started to notice it, but dude, Kiryu, your best friend died because you beat the bad guy and turned your back to the bad guy with the gun, and as a result, Rikia gets shot. So what happens in the last chapter? Daigo shoots the bad guy with the gun and Kiryu is like, cool, nothing bad could possibly happen. Then the bad guy with the gun ends up killing Mine. Dude, come on. Don't worry, 4 keeps the tradition alive in an even dumber manner. The epilogue is also really stupid. I like Kiryu's quote.
死ぬくらいなら生きて罪を償えよ。
なんだと？
死ぬ覚悟があれば何でもできるはずだ。お前に信じるものがあってやり直すつもりがあるなら力を貸すぜ。
But Kiryu gets stabbed in the stomach and he collapses. Looks like he might not have survived this one. Crazy, he went through all of that just to die to some dickhead stabbing him. So the credits play and they're unskippable, and then at the end, there's Kiryu and he's 100% fine. So what was the point of this scene at all? What is the purpose? I like Kiryu's speech, but they still could have had that scene without pretending Kiryu is dead. Did they think the ending wasn't dramatic enough, so they just said, I know, we'll make everyone think something bad happened to Kiryu for a few minutes? Tricked ya. Yeah, this part should not have been part of the story. I started this game in the Remastered collection, so when this happened, I just rolled my eyes. Oh no, I'm sure Kiryu is actually totally dead. His twin brother must be the protagonist of the next 3 games. Okay, one last complaint and then I'm done. Kazuma has a twin brother that works for the CIA that he just never told Kiryu about. They try to explain this by saying, oh, they were in 2 different worlds. How could he talk about his brother working for the CIA when he's in the Yakuza? So in other words, yeah, it makes no sense, but just accept it. Also, Kazuma didn't shoot Daigo or Nakahara. That's what they all think at the beginning of the game. But Kazuma explains, Andre was with him and Andre got jumpy and shot Daigo, and then less than 2 hours later, the exact same thing happens with Nakahara. Holy shit, that's dumb. You didn't think to maybe leave the jumpy guy out of this after he shot the first guy for no reason? I actually like Kazuma. It's dumb how he was introduced, but whatever, he's here, so you might as well use him, right? Well, he doesn't return in any other games either. Overall, this story has a lot of charm. I know I shout all over it, but it's not nearly as bad as I remember. But yeah, it's definitely my least favorite story in the series. So this game has both removed content and added content. When the game originally came out in America, it was missing a bunch of features the Japanese version had. It was very stripped down. So when they remastered it, they added in all of that cut content. And then they cut content. So there's a series of side stories involving Michiru that were removed. I'm assuming it's due to being transphobic. Michiru chases down Kiryu and tries to get his sugar buns. The side stories with Michiru were removed from both the Japanese and the English remaster, so it's not like they just cut it out of the American version to appeal to a more Western audience. It's either something they foresaw being a problem, or they just didn't want to deal with it. I'm never going to support cutting content, especially multiple side stories, but I think a happy medium would be to remove them by default, but have an option to turn the stories on. Maybe even have a warning saying, hey, we removed this specifically so people wouldn't get offended, so if you turn it back on, you can't go on a Twitter rant about how RGG is transphobic. That way, everyone wins. If you don't want them in the game, you don't have to have them, but if you still want to see it, it's at least there. And I mean, come on, this is pretty funny. Sugar buns? That's hilarious. Okay, I kinda see why they removed these. Also, they removed a minigame called Answer X Answer. You can still see the arcade machines around town, and it was apparently a quiz game that asked a bunch of questions about Japanese culture. That's kinda lame. I don't really see the reason for cutting this. The last big change is a lot of the hostesses are different. They were based on real people, so for the remaster they just changed all of them. Some of the hostesses returned from the previous game, so that's at least a nice compromise. The only problem is once you complete a hostess's final substory, she'll thank you, the screen will go white, and then it cuts to them in the hotel district talking about how great it was. They're by the batting center, so I'm assuming they went batting. I don't know what else they would be doing in the hotel district. In the other games, when the screen goes white, it'll play an actual video of a girl rolling around on the bed in lingerie. I'm guessing this is what was removed, but it is kind of jarring that there's nothing there. Also, I don't see the sub-stories coming back ever again, so all in all, we didn't lose too much, and we actually gained more than we lost. When the game was remastered, it really feels like they put the minimal effort into it. I don't think they playtested much because, as you'll see, most of the minigames are almost unplayable, and even stuff like the combat was messed up as well. I haven't played the original, so I'm taking the community's opinion on this, that a lot of these minigames and the combat were not this bad. It seems like switching to a new console, as well as increasing the FPS, screwed up a lot of stuff, and they just didn't bother fixing it. Okay, so it seems like the combat is the most divisive in any Yakuza game. There seems to be two opinions of the combat. It sucks, Blockuza, I hate it, or it's amazing, if you don't like it, you suck. I'm somewhere in the middle. There's parts of the combat that are just terrible. The biggest problem most people have with the combat is the blocking. Enemies block everything. Here was my initial experience. The combat was annoying to me because the enemies constantly block, and my only retaliation was to throw enemies around, which was incredibly boring. They introduced heavy enemies you can't throw, so now I have to throw all the enemies around before finding a way around the heavy and getting some hits in, and slowly beating him. This made every street battle absolutely unbearable. Street battles are slow here because first, someone on the street will run up to you, or stop you and say something to start a fight like, hey, did you fuck my wife? And then there's a pause while the game loads, and you stare awkwardly at each other, before there's a zoom in on Kiryu's face, and then you can finally fight. Now you have to toss the enemies around and slowly take out the heavy. Now that you've won, it loads again and cuts to the guy you beat up, and he says something else now like, alright, I guess you can fuck my wife, and then he'll give you an item. After a few hours of this game, it turned into a horror game. I'd see an enemy standing in the middle of the street, so I'd quickly run around him. I'd hear him yelling at me, so I'd run as fast as I can, hoping to escape, only run to his friend a few feet away. And it also seemed like there were way more street encounters than in any other Yakuza game. You would get into a fight and then turn a corner and get into another fight. I get having story missions or bosses blocking more often and being difficult fights, or even taking longer in general. But when every fight turns into a whole ordeal, it's not fun. Needless to say, I hated this combat and it made me rush through the whole game, which in turn made me hate the game. Going back to it, the first thing I did was unlock every move, and it does get way better. Like I said, the enemies are extremely block heavy in this game. Some enemies will literally block everything. You can pick up a giant weapon and attack an enemy, and every hit will break their guard, but they'll guard again before you can hit them. So you just waste a weapon, just breaking their guard over and over again. There's 4 ways to get around the blocking. You can throw the enemies, which is what I ended up doing at first, but it's not fun just throwing everyone over and over again. It makes the game really easy, but it's so lame and repetitive, plus you can't throw bigger enemies or most bosses. You can use the Kamaki parry or the tiger drop, which is what made me start to like this game. The Kamaki parry is activated by pressing the grab button right when an enemy attacks, doing a counterattack that stuns the enemy. You can then go behind the enemy and get some free hits in. The tiger drop does more damage than the Kamaki parry, but has a shorter window to activate. It's a lot harder to hit a tiger drop, which made it more fun to use. The problem with these two moves is they're only unlocked in Chapter 5 after completing a specific sub-story. You have to beat almost half the game before getting the moves that make the combat way better. I really feel like these two moves should have been part of Kiryu's base combat. At least if the game is this block heavy, it should have been included. Kiryu learned these moves in the first game and he keeps forgetting. You're getting dementia, old man. Lastly, you can dodge around an enemy as they attack to get behind them to avoid their block. It's easier to hit 3 tiger drops in a row than to rely on this dodge. Apparently, this wasn't as bad in the original, get used to me saying that, but most of the time when you dodge, instead of going behind the enemy, Kiryu just keeps on sliding and goes right back in front of the enemy. Or, as soon as you get behind the enemy, they're still in the middle of a combo, so they'll just turn and punch you. I see a lot of people defending this game saying, the game isn't bad, you just have to counter anything. You hate the combat because you suck and can't dodge good. First of all, calm down. Second of all, the AI is really bad. Like yeah, once you get all the abilities and everything, the problem isn't so much Kiryu, it's more the enemies. When you start a battle, most of the time, all the enemies just stand around, same as in boss fights. You have to make the first move, otherwise they'll stand there or dash around. Next time someone say the combat is bad in Yakuza 3, send them this. So any combat action will trigger the enemies to attack, sometimes. The best method I found is to start a combo. The enemy will block every single attack. As soon as your combo ends, press the grab button. If the enemy doesn't attack, you can just grab them and toss them, then pick them up from behind, allowing you to get a combo in. However, most of the time, this will bait the enemy into attacking you, and you'll perform the Kamaki parry. Then you can get behind the enemy and get an actual combo off, knock them into a wall, which causes them to bounce, allowing you to combo them even more. Yeah, that's awesome. That's super fun. After hundreds of fights, it still never got stale. Or you can just spam heavy attack over and over. Again, this will do some damage to the enemy, but more than likely, it'll bait the enemy into attacking, and since you're already pressing the heavy attack over and over again, you'll likely get a tiger drop in, which will send the enemy flying, hopefully into a wall, which lets you get a combo in. The wall bouncing is sick, just not when it happens to you. The problem that having any combat action trigger enemies to attack is that if you're in a fight with multiple people, as soon as you start attacking one person, everyone will run in and beat the shit out of you. It's kind of hard to counter when all the enemies just stand around and the second you grab a weapon or attack any of them, they all go into attack mode. Some enemies just literally won't attack you, or their only concern is just avoiding you. This was mostly in Coliseum, but there were some fighters that just dance around the ring, and there's nothing you can really do to hit them. You can't even grab them because they'll be dodging. Even when your hand goes through them, it doesn't count because they're dodging. It made a lot of fights that weren't a threat just drag on. Also, one last complaint is when you lock on or get into a fighting stance, I missed a lot of attacks. Way more than in any other Yakuza game. I'm not expecting Dark Souls lock on or anything like that, but I had way too many times, mostly in tag team fights, where I got behind an enemy and I have a short window to attack and Kiryu just starts attacking the air next to the enemy. Other than that, yeah, the combat is really good. With some minor tweaks, I can definitely see this being one of the best fighting styles in any Yakuza game. Make Kiryu's dodge only go behind enemies, make enemies way less passive, and allow Kiryu to break through a block with something other than counters. Maybe have a cooldown on the enemy's guard once you break it. They can't block again for several seconds. I'll just say this because I know someone will bring it up. Changing difficulty doesn't make the enemies more aggressive. Most of my combat was done on hard, and the enemies still just stood around. So yeah, the combat is decent, but it could be incredible with a few changes. Unfortunately, from what I've read, it seems like the remaster made the combat worse instead of fixing it. This game introduces revelations. Kiryu will notice someone around the city. This will trigger a scene of that person doing something. Kiryu takes a picture of them using a QTE and then posts it to his blog. It's kind of annoying trying to find where to go, and the really annoying part is you get 3 options of a caption to post a picture with. It's really just a guess on which one to pick. There's no obvious right answer. If you pick wrong, you fail and have to leave the area and come back to start the revelation all over. Other than that, I really like these, and they were really funny. Kiryu gets into chases throughout the game. You hold R2 to sprint and tackle whoever you're chasing when you get close enough. The goal is to break their health bar before Kiryu runs out of energy. You can upgrade your chasing stats through max training. I actually really like the chasing sections. The only hard thing was not knowing if you're close enough to tackle someone. If you're not quite close enough, you'll miss and get slowed down. Some of these can be really hard, but I liked cutting corners as tight as I could and trying to get as many tackles in as possible. In my opinion, 3 has some of the best sub-stories. Yakuza 3 makes up for a lot of its flaws with the sheer plethora of sub-stories. There's 120. 120! I kept thinking some of these would suck, and I'm not going to pretend every sub-story is amazing, but these were pretty darn consistent. There's a group of dudes that walk around, and if you bump into them, they'll try and scam you into giving them money. Every time you finish the sub-story, they show up again with more people, and the sub-story basically repeats. Once you finally beat them up enough times, they decide to leave Okinawa and try their scam somewhere else. They go to Kamurocho, and the first person they try to scam is Kiryu. Yeah, it's a little annoying that you do the same sub-story over and over again, but that's pretty damn funny to me. I do have some complaints though. You can fail a sub-story, it still counts as completed, but you just don't get the good ending. There's one where you have to tail this guy, and I can literally see him. He's right there when the game tells me that I failed. And then that's just it. I don't get to see how that sub-story ends unless I restart the game. If I mess up, that's one thing, but some of these are just annoying with how you fail. This lady wants me to get an autograph, but there's nowhere for me to go. Everywhere I try to go doesn't work and I end up failing. It's just really annoying, now I don't get to see the ending to that. Other than that though, I really enjoyed these and some of them are super in depth. Like I said, Rikia has 2 side stories that should be part of the main game, they're so good. Date also has a story that's super involved and interesting. Kiryu stars in a movie about Yakuza, which is pretty funny.
Oh.
Kiryu ちゃんなら絶対に大スターになれるぜ。眼力もすごいけど、背中からもオーラを感じる。うん、そう思うだろ。お疲れ様です。はい、そうですね。どこのプロダクションにも入ってないなら、うちの映画会社の専属になったよ。みんなもそれがいいと思うだろ。よくないです。なんなんだよ。全員揃って。
すまんな。俺も映画には興味がない。これで失礼させてもらう。
はい、お勤めご苦労様。はい、いや、ご出演お疲れ様でした。お疲れ様でした。
なんなんだ。一体。
And of course, the final sub-story is Amon. I don't have much to say about Amon, he wasn't too bad in this one. Also, at this point I had the War God Talisman, which gives you unlimited heat, so it made the fight pretty simple. So there's 3 points of completion in this game. You can get all the trophies, which is hard. Next, there's a completion list in the game, which isn't required for all the trophies, but it's also very hard. Finally, there's Haruka's Trust. Again, there's no trophy for this, but it's part of completing the game. I'll talk more about the individual challenge as I get to them, and I'll talk about completing them at the end. But just be aware, some of this stuff is required for a trophy, some for the completion list, and some for Haruka's Trust. There's 4 difficulties in batting: easy, medium, hard, and extra hard. You have to score over 1800 points in each for completion. Easy is difficult because you get 20 hits, and on easy you don't have to aim, which is not good because you can only get 100 points per hit. Remember, you have to get over 1800 points. 1800 doesn't count. So on easy, you have to hit at least 19 out of 20 balls. Getting a hit is fucking hard as shit. A lot of people say watch Kiryu and swing when his bat stops moving. Yeah, this didn't work for me at all. On faster balls, whenever I tried this, I would swing way too early, and on slower balls, I'd swing early because I was anticipating it too much. Instead, I watched the ball, and that felt like a crapshoot. If your timing is just a bit off, you'll foul the ball, which is incredibly frustrating. Even after completing every course, I still don't feel like I have the timing down. This is without a doubt the worst batting minigame I've ever played. They expect you to play perfectly with controls that just don't feel intuitive at all. I can deal with that when either I don't have to play perfectly, it's easy, or it's short. This is none of those things. I waited to do hard for Haruka's request because she wanted to get 3000 points. To get 3000 points, you have to hit at least 2 targets at once. There's an achievement for doing this once, yet this requires you to do it several times and play almost perfectly. This took me so long trying to get the ball lined up while trying to hit the ball. It was so damn annoying. You have to be so precise. Centering the ball of the reticle, that tiny little dot on the corner of multiple targets, just did not feel good. Sometimes it felt like the reticle just would not go where you want it, and you only have a few seconds before the ball comes. Oh well, took me a few hours, but at least extra hard can't be harder than this, right? Right? For extra hard, you have to play almost perfectly while aiming the balls, but they take your reticle away. This really doesn't matter. Here's a pro tip. Get a sticker or something and put it where the reticle would be on the normal or hard mode, and you now have a reticle. This works perfectly, but it's still incredibly difficult. It switches from extremely fast balls to extremely slow balls. I can't stop fouling the ball. If I hit the ball, I hit the ball. Fuck off with the foul shit. I think for extra hard, the window for hitting the balls is much smaller. I'm assuming the switch to 60 FPS made the window even tighter. I read it wasn't this bad in the original, and this is where I hit a wall. I could not get this. I spent 4 hours just going crazy trying to beat this, and couldn't. I decided what I was doing wasn't working, and so I started looking at Kiryu's bat like everyone said. This worked really well, but I was still missing way too much. That's when I realized this method was too inconsistent for me. If you swing the second Kiryu tenses up and stops his bat, sometimes it's too early. You have to wait a tiny little millisecond and then swing. However, I already had an issue with swinging too late, so having to wait on some of them made it impossible for me. The balls that are pitched are the same every time, and the speeds are pretty close. So even knowing that, this method just did not work for me. I wasted 3 hours trying to get this to work before I realized it wouldn't, switch back to what I was doing before, just watching the ball. So here's what ultimately worked for me. There's 3 pitches: stinkers, curves, and fastballs. Their names don't actually mean anything. Fastball just means it comes at you straight. It can be incredibly slow. For fastballs, I'd look at the speed it would come at and get ready. Then I imagined an invisible line, and once the ball crossed that line, I'd swing. You just have to get a feel for it to know when to swing, unfortunately. Curves come from the left, and stinkers from the right. Here's the fun thing about these. If you're trying to hit a target on the right, you can't see the ball coming from the left, and vice versa. In these instances, you have to look at the bat. A good tip is to see what pitches are coming and plan accordingly. If it's a fastball, hit a target in the middle. If it's coming from the right, hit a target on the right. Curveballs curve from the left. Their trajectory will change about halfway through. Don't hit yet. Wait for it to get closer to you and then hit. Curves have to get pretty close to hit them. Finally, stinkers. These are the hardest to hit. These curve just like curveballs, only from the other side. The only difference is you need to swing pretty close to right when their trajectory changes. Once they turn from going right to the center, they speed up, especially on the quicker balls. You won't be able to see it coming. You just have to swing when the trajectory changes. Also, don't try and brute force it like I did. This took me 7 hours because I wanted to finish it so I could take the damn sticker off my screen. I ended up going crazy and just wasting my time missing easy balls. If you don't get it after half an hour, take a break. This is one of the hardest challenges in the game and it's going to take you a while. Take your time and be patient, and fuck this minigame. In pool, you have to beat 4 difficulties and 3 different modes. The way this works, you line up your shot with the left stick while using multiple angles to view the ball, and you hit the ball by pulling the right stick back and releasing. The further you pull back, the more power you'll have. You can also move the left stick to adjust the position you hit the cue ball. I never use this, aside from one challenge which I'll get to. I can barely get the ball to go where I want to normally, so why would I try to put a spin on it or do any other of that fancy shit? So after about an hour of playing, I was doing okay, but I noticed sometimes the ball wasn't going where I aimed at. You have to be extremely precise with pool, so that was a huge disadvantage. I did a little research and found out, when they remastered this game, they didn't make any adjustments for changing from a PS3 controller to PS4, or whatever controller you might use. Because of that, the right stick is extremely sensitive. When you pull back and release the right stick, there's a good chance the game will think you didn't release perfectly straight, which will cause you to miss your shot. I didn't even know this was a thing, but the right stick doesn't just control the power of your hit, it controls how you hit the ball as well. Just naturally releasing the right stick is enough to prevent the ball from going exactly where you want it. Because of this, power shots were out for me, too inconsistent. I had to just barely use enough power because that would prevent me from having to pull the right stick back very far and gave me the best opportunity of hitting my mark. I also used a ruler to adjust my angle, giving me the best shot of winning. You may think that sounds cheap, but on Expert, you get on average 2 turns to win, whatever mode you're playing. This is medium. This minigame requires you to play perfectly, and it's the most broken. If you're completing this game yourself, the only advice I can give you is just keep trying to play perfect and wait for an opportunity where the computer fucks up and allows you an extra turn or 2. I got lucky and the expert just kept screwing up. I think he felt sorry for me after a while. Oh, there's also a trophy tied to this where you have to win 9 ball on the first turn. This is the only time I use spin. When you break, go all the way right, aim at the edge of the 1 ball, and hit the cue ball on the top. I don't know why this worked, but it works. Sometimes. This will sink the 9 ball as you're breaking, allowing you to win on your first turn. In addition to 9 ball, you have to play 8 ball, which is a standard version of pool, I'm sure most people are familiar with, and rotation. Rotation fucking sucks. This is a terrible game mode. You have to hit the balls in order, starting with 1. If you miss the next ball or hit another ball first, it's a foul. So let's say you're on fire. You knock the 1 in, the 2, the 3, the 4, 5, 6. That's 21 points for 6 balls. The next player only has to hit 3 balls in to be winning. My point is, this mode is way too long and the beginning doesn't matter. Oh, you're supposed to knock the lower numbered balls into the higher to score points? Yeah, good fucking luck doing that in this broken ass minigame. The computer will do that though, which means you can't just leave the low numbered balls to him. It's basically ammo for him to score massive points. I thought 8 ball would give me the most trouble. To win, you have to hit the 8 ball after hitting all your balls in, and you have to declare which hole you're going to put it in. If you miss, it's a foul, and if you get in the wrong hole, that's an automatic loss. But rotation was definitely the hardest mode. While we're talking about broken controls, darts is also broken, but I got decent at it. You aim with the left stick. Once you're where you want to be, you pull the right stick back, again controlling how much power you want to use, and release to throw, the whole time holding the left stick in position. If that sounds awkward, it is. What's worse is this has the same problem as pull. When you release the right stick, it'll think you didn't release it perfectly straight, and you'll throw to the complete opposite side of the dartboard. I did find a trick to make this work. Aim where you want, very slowly pull the right stick back, just until Kiryu pulls his hand back, maybe a little more, but not too much, and release it as easy as you can. Basically, the power is irrelevant. Even with no power, the dart will go where you want it, and the more power, the higher chance the right stick will slightly move to the right or left as you release. Always aim for the triple 20, and if you miss, for some reason, it'll hit a bullseye, which is almost as good. This game has 3 modes and 3 difficulties, but this time you have to play in Kamurocho and Okinawa, so 18 matches total. By the end of this, I was hitting 540s on count up, which is a perfect score. But I had no idea how to play this without looking it up. You have to aim before pulling the dart back by trying to look where the dart will be on the board, and Kiryu's hand shakes like he has Parkinson's. I'm just glad I got the hang of it, but having to do 3 difficulties in both towns was incredibly time consuming. But it could be worse. There could be pool in Kamurocho too. This is a fun minigame until you realize how broken it is. Again, for the 100th time, apparently this wasn't so bad in the original, but they fucked it up in the remaster. For completion, you only have to get 200 in a 10-frame game, which is pretty easy. However, for Haruka's Trust, you have to bowl a 270. I'm not sure how many strikes that is, I don't understand how bowling scores work, but I think you can get 2 spares, everything else has to be a strike, which is where the brokenness is exposed. Bowling works by selecting where you want to throw the ball, you then select the angle you want to throw at, next you select how much power to use. Finally, as Kiryu is throwing the ball, you have a few seconds to curve the ball right or left. The amount of curve is shown by bars on the right and left. You can fill each bar up halfway or all the way. The more bars, the more curve. I tried to find a video on getting a 270 and there was only one. This person still didn't get a perfect score and said it took them hours. There's a strategy to get a strike. Go all the way left, tap X quickly to aim your shot, and then curve the ball 2 to the left. Yeah, this does not work. Or what I should say is it's not consistent. I think when they switched to 60 FPS in the remaster, it made the angle you hit by using the strategy all over the place. If I hit X as fast as I could, it would usually aim at the center. If you curve half to the left, it'll get you a strike, sometimes. There's a spot on the center pin that you just cannot get a strike from. Also, getting a strike requires RNG. To get a strike, you need the pins you hit to knock down the rest of the pins. There was one pin on the back right that always stayed up. You need the pins you knock down to roll into that one, which happened about 60% of the time. That's too inconsistent to get a 270. I actually had one run where a pin was just rolling into the back right one and started to knock it down, but before it fell, the pin collector came down and it didn't count. So you definitely have to get lucky. There is a perfect spot you can hit where if you curve it right, it'll strike every time, but good luck hitting it. I used a metronome when choosing my angle. Like I said, if I hit X as quick as I could, it was too soon and I'd hit the center pin. So when I tried using a metronome, do you know what happened? I hit a different angle every fucking time. When you're selecting your angle, it doesn't show where it'll hit on the actual pins, so it's too hard to try and select it manually. This is what I ended up doing. Go all the way left, hit X pretty quick. If it wasn't in the center, I curved 1 left. If it hit the right pin, I'd curve half left. And if it hit that sweet spot, I'd curve 2 left. Other than that, you really just have to get lucky. The pins are just glued down sometimes. Also, curving the ball is so finicky. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be like this, but I missed multiple strikes because it didn't curve how I wanted it to. You tap left to half fill the bar and it just jumps like 1.5. Then you tap right to dial it back and it just doesn't move. If it's supposed to be like this, then that sucks. If it's not, well, I'll just chalk that up to another thing they fucked up in the remaster. Also, if you're thinking you're a pro and can get strikes consistently, and I just suck, Please upload a video of you getting a 300 in this minigame. Seriously, a video like that doesn't exist right now and I'd love to see it. Driving in this game is awesome. Putting is terrible. There's competition mode and near the hole. Competition is just a golf course. You need to score a -2. Like I said, driving is fun. You pick your putter and where you want to hit the ball. You can select where to hit the golf ball. Close to the bottom increases the time it's in the air and lessens the bounce when it lands. Adjust your hit for win and let her rip. You hold X and release it to set the power, then hit X again at the bottom to get a perfect shot. This is where it gets kind of annoying. You either hit a perfect shot or it goes nowhere near where you want it. If you don't get a perfect shot, not only does it pick a random spot on the ball to hit, the power gets fucked up too. Once you're on the green, you putt it in. Putting works similar to driving. You aim, select your power, and adjust for wind. The only difference is the green is always bumpy, so now you have to take into consideration the wind and the curve of the hill. Even if it's perfectly straight, flat shot, it's still hard as shit. The putter hits 30 meters. You can use half power, but you still don't get an actual number for how many meters you hit. You just know a maximum power is 30 meters, and you have to figure out the rest yourself. If the hole is 4.7 meters, and you hit the ball 5 meters, the ball will just blow past the hole. 4.5 and it'll stop short. These courses are pretty generous, so as long as your drive is good, you should have 2 shots to put it in. So just get as close as you can, and then tap X quickly twice to tap it in. This is more than enough to get -5, but that's no excuse for how bad putting is. I'm guessing it was probably better in the original. Next, near the hole is 10 rounds of trying to get as close to the hole as possible with driving. The course is the same for every round, the only thing that changes is the wind. Like I said, driving is fun, but for Haruka's request, you have to get 1500 points. If you're as close to the pin as possible, you get 150 points, which is extremely difficult. You have to do that 10 times in a row to win, or you can get at least 1 hole-in-one. That's worth 300 points. So if you get 5 of them, you could get the points without hitting anything else. There's no video I could find of anyone doing this. You just have to get good. This took me quite a few hours, and here's my winning attempt. I like driving, so this wasn't as bad as pull or batting, just time consuming. Fishing wasn't too bad, but definitely look up Z's guide for this. I don't feel like the game does a good job explaining how to play. Basically, if you try to reel a fish in the direction it's swimming, you can reel it in, no problem. But the second the fish swims another direction, it'll put tension on the line. My biggest complaint is you have to go to Okinawa to buy bait, and it's pretty much as far away as humanly possible. Once you use the bait, there's a chance you can do everything right, yet the fish just won't bite and you'll still lose the bait. That was extremely frustrating, when I walked all the way across town just to get bait, and then lose it on nothing. Other than that, this was pretty straightforward once you get the hang of it. One of the few non-broken minigames. I loved Coliseum. Once you unlock all the combat abilities, it's pretty fun. Street fights suck, but one-on-one fights are actually cool. Every fighter is different, so you almost have to come up with a winning strategy for each fighter. I never thought I'd say this, but I like the combat in Yakuza 3. There's also tag team battles. There's several fighters you can recruit around Kamurocho, and they'll fight alongside you. This is such a cool idea, although essentially it boils down to your tag fighter distracts one opponent while you take out the other one. Then you and your tag fighter take out the other opponent. This is designed so that your tag fighter can't knock anyone out. You have to take them both out. Also, there's no leveling up your Coliseum rank. In Zero, you had to keep playing the same tournaments over and over to level up and unlock the next tournament. Here, you just have to beat each mode a maximum of 5 times, usually less, to unlock the next tournament. Zero, it was more like 20. So yeah, Yakuza 3 has a way better Coliseum than Zero. Some of these fights though are really annoying. There were fighters that were really difficult or that just danced around the ring, not attacking, and not letting you hit them. So they weren't hard, just super time consuming, which is no fun when you're trying to unlock all the fighters. There's several fighters to unlock. This isn't required for a trophy, but it is for the completion list. The last fighter is Valerie Garrett, and he fucking sucks. There's no guarantee he'll show up, so you just have to fight through 2 fighters just to get a chance of him showing up. If he doesn't, you can sit through another fight or just quit out and reload the game. I chose the latter. I got really sick of fighting through the same fights over and over. When I finally did get to Garrett, he comboed me like crazy and took away most of my health bar in one combo. So I could either play through this tournament again and again, hoping for Garrett to show up, fighting him over and over, getting clapped right away until I got good enough to beat him, or I can be a cheap little bitch and be done with this mode. Guess what I picked? Yeah, once your health is low, your heat gauge starts to fill up. Once you get enough heat, you can roll towards the enemy to perform a heat move called the Essence of Rolling. Rinse and repeat, and that's the safest way to beat an enemy. Look, I beat all of these fighters countless times. I don't feel like sitting through this tournament over and over just to beat one fighter. If he challenged you outside of the ring and you could initiate the fight whenever you want, fine, I don't care how long it takes. But when I have to fight through 2 other fighters and there's no guarantee he'll show up, that's just annoying. There were some other fighters that just refused to show up, and by the end of Coliseum, I went from loving it to just wanting it to be over. I started to notice how much shit is on the screen during a tag fight. On the harder fights, this gets really annoying and got me hurt a few times. You have to look for subtle movements to parry or tiger drop, or just avoid getting hit. So all the stuff on the screen really got in the way. Anyways, overall, I did enjoy this mode, and your reward for completing it is the Dragon Binding, which is basically just really good stat gear. Gambling is the worst it's ever been. I'm sure from Yakuza 1 and 2 it was a big improvement, but I don't understand how you can fuck up RNG this badly. Almost every game has some kind of problem. Most of these just have the worst RNG possible. Blackjack isn't too bad. It's one of the better minigames, and it's pretty easy to get the requirements using cheat items. I had to do the last challenge without cheat items, and it wasn't awful. Poker is really bad. I actually really like poker in these games. I learned how to play poker through Yakuza, and it's normally one of my favorite parts. I don't know what happened here, but I couldn't get a winning hand to save my life. Most of my hands weren't anything, but even when I had a hand, I'd still lose somehow. I would get a 3 pair and think, finally! After 20 turns, I have a hand that can do something. I would bet, and then the computer would end up getting a straight. I would get a straight and think, oh finally! The computer can't beat this, and the computer would get a full house. Unless you have the best possible hand, just assume the computer has something better, because most of the time they do. This wasn't really a hard challenge, just tedious. Haruka wants you to end poker with 5,000 points more than what you started, so after you get a winning hand, you know you'll just have to keep folding for the next 10 hands till you get something halfway decent. And don't bother staying in the bet unless you're absolutely sure you can win, otherwise that's all your progress gone. Roulette is fine. They give you enough cheat items to win a shitload of money, and Haruka wants you to win 2,000 chips. Bet on black or red while betting 1,000 chips, and you just have to win twice in a row. My only complaint with roulette is they give you so much time to place your chips. I bet on red or black and then set the controller down, fuck around on my phone waiting for it to stop spinning. There should be an option to end your turn so you don't have to sit through the countdown every time. CeeLo is awful. I talked about how much I hated CeeLo in my Yakuza 0 video, and yeah, this should not be in the game. To play CeeLo, you choose how much you want to bet, and then you press X. That's it. This is such a boring game, and there's zero skill involved. At least with roulette, you can choose where to place your chips. With blackjack and poker, there's some skill involved. This is just where you go to lose brain cells. Press X. Again, and again, and again. The way this works is you roll dice 3 times, there's 4 players, everyone rolls 3 times, and everyone takes a turn as the banker. And none of it matters, just press X. It's extremely slow. Not only do you have to watch each computer player roll their dice 3 times, but the game will stop and zoom into the dice to show what they rolled. Dude, I don't care. I'm just pressing X. There's a lot of cheat items in this, and I didn't even use all of my CeeLo cheat items, because after I met all the requirements, no way was I playing that piece of shit again. Chohan is a game where dice is rolled, and you guess if the results are even or odd. There's more to it, but again, this one's pretty easy to get all the requirements for. One cool thing to mention is after ranking up Haruka's Trust enough, she'll occasionally call out whether it's even or odd. I do mean occasionally. After I unlocked this, I thought I was doing something wrong because she just wouldn't call it out for the longest time. Also, once she does tell you what it's going to be, sometimes she's just wrong. It only happened one time, but she called it out, I chose what she called, and it played a quick little scene of Haruka looking upset and Kiryu giving her a dirty look, and I got it wrong. I do wish Haruka would either call it out more, or at least not get it wrong. I was really looking forward to unlocking this so I could easily get through Chohan, and it doesn't really help at all.
超半駒揃いました。勝負。余一の半。残念だった。おかしいな。
Also, the cheat items don't really work for this. You get a lopsided cigarette, which makes most of the other players bet on one side, and if everyone bets on even and you bet on odd, you get a huge payout. But both times I used a lopsided cigarette, everyone bet on even and even won. So even if I had guessed right, the payout would have been shit. So kind of a useless item. Unless you save scum. Koi Koi is amazing. I love Koi Koi. My only problem is that in this version, I had to play on an easier difficulty. I normally have no problems winning Koi Koi, but here I could not get any matches whatsoever, and I had quite a few turns where the computer would win on the second turn, which is super fun and not annoying at all. Also, I only ever unlocked Advanced. You have to win the previous difficulty a certain amount of times to unlock the next one. I beat Advanced 3 or 4 times, and I only needed a little more points to finish the requirements, so I just finished it off on Beginner. Even if I had stuck with Advanced, I wouldn't have unlocked a final difficulty after completing all the requirements, which is kinda lame. Oicho Kabu is even worse for this. Almost every gambling game starts with low stakes or easy difficulty. Once you win or play enough, you can do the next difficulty. The max difficulty allows you to bet the most. I completed Oicho Kabu and could only bet 500 tags out of 1,000. Why does it take so long to unlock high stakes? And why would anyone keep playing after completing all the requirements for Oicho Kabu? I feel like some of this wasn't really thought through well. Would it really have been that big of a deal to allow players to bet 1,000 tags from the beginning? It's not real money. It's not like I'm going to go into debt. It would have made the challenge go a lot quicker, and I imagine that's the only reason to block high stakes off. Either way, this was extremely frustrating, especially only being able to bet 500 tags at a time. It took me a really long time, and I somehow didn't unlock high stakes. Great, I'll never play it again. Some advice for these challenges is just be patient. Also, make sure to get every single gambling cheat item. Don't use them. Now unlock high stakes in every gambling game. Still don't use them. Wait for Haruka to ask you to gamble to use that specific cheat item and only use one. For example, if you have a roulette cheat item, only use one of them to get whatever requirement Haruka wants from you. I fucked up and used all my roulette cheat items all at once. Then when Haruka asked me to win a certain amount of chips again, I had to do it the hard way. Still wasn't too bad, but it would have saved me some time if I had saved these cheat items. Mahjong is the worst it's ever been. Easy is holy shit turbo titty twister difficulty. Hey, how can a luck-based game have a difficulty setting? Exactly. Usually Mahjong gets hard in these games by not letting you get the tiles you need, or giving the computer everything they need on the first turn or some other bullshit. But here, you just don't get any of the tiles you need. I went for a full straight a few times, and every time I was 1 or 2 tiles away, with 4 of them left, and 30 turns would slowly go by without that tile coming up. The next round, as if to taunt me, that specific tile which show up 4 times in the first turn. I suppose I should mention what the requirements are for Mahjong. One is to have a fully open hand, which if you're used to Mahjong that isn't too difficult. The other challenge is to finish a match with 50,000 points. If this minigame was made by anyone other than RGG, it wouldn't be too bad. But here, you will not get anything you need after you get 40,000 points. The game does everything in its power to fuck you. Oh, you're discarding a north tile on your first hand? That's exactly what the AI needed to get a fully concealed triplet. Fuck you. Seriously, I got up to 40k almost every attempt, but something would always happen and I'd end up not being able to get that last little bit. It's sad because Mahjong is really fun, but I swear RGG must have a vendetta against that game. Someone must have lost a shitload of money at Mahjong and has now made it their life's mission to make everyone hate Mahjong as much as possible. The requirements for completion are always insane. This version of Mahjong is absolutely the most rigged and least enjoyable. Once you get the basics, go download a random Mahjong game or find one online. Play on easy mode after playing RGG's version. Actually, if you get good at Mahjong and Yakuza, you're basically an expert in every other version. All in all, I shouldn't complain too much, because I think this is the least time-consuming Mahjong has ever been for me. This took me 2 hours to complete. I got the open hand achievement in about half an hour, and the rest was just playing to get 50,000 points. A tip for this, don't play at any of the tables. Go to Kamurocho's Mahjong parlor and play the ranked mode. You don't have to keep betting every time, so you don't have to worry about losing money. And ranked is actually way easier than easy mode, as long as you don't rank up. So if you're about to win, but you don't have 50,000 points, quit out so you don't rank up, and ranked mode will never get any harder. Shogi, once again, I have nothing to say about. I absolutely suck at Shogi. There's a video showing how to beat Haruka the first 2 times she challenges you, and another showing how to beat the first challenge mode without moving your king, which is necessary for a trophy. The only other requirement is to win 5 matches. You can play the same match 5 times to easily get this, so that's not too bad, but you also have to beat Haruka a 3rd time. The strategy for this is to download a Shogi player, play on the hardest difficulty, make sure Haruka goes first, and plug her moves into the Shogi player. Then just do what the computer does. It took me a couple of tries, but there's no way I could have beaten a baby at Shogi, let alone a 13-year-old girl. There's a fortune teller that offers to let you play special modes. The first is survival mode. This is essentially Yakuza 3 arcade mode. Your goal is to beat up Mine in Theater Square. However, you start at level 1. You can fight other bosses throughout the city in order to level up and beat him. I never finished this mode, the only reward is money, but it might be something I come back to. I really like this idea. Next is survival tag. I can't find a video of anyone completing this. In fact, there's only one video I was even able to find on this. The way this works is Bob the Clown chases you, I think there can be up to 5 of them, and you get an email giving you a hint on where to go, and you have to make it there without getting caught. Make it to 10 locations to beat this mode. However, after every location you get to, you just have to sit around and wait for such a long time for the next location to show up. Some of the hints also didn't give me a good idea of where to go, and there's no information on this. The most I got was 3, and the vast majority of the time was waiting for another email and not knowing where to go next. This one was just way too tedious for me to finish. It's not that hard, just way too slow. Next is Ultimate Match and Ultimate Tag Match. Ultimate Match is a Coliseum battle where Kiryu fights against 3 random bosses, which is pretty cool, but Ultimate Tag Match is the best. You team up with Majima to fight 3 tag team bosses. I love this mode. I wish they kept this idea and all the other future games. How cool is it you can fight with Majima against all the actual story bosses? Also, completing this mode can easily give you 1,000,000 yen, so it's a good way to grind money. Haruka gives you various rewards. You keep leveling up letter grades until you get to S, then SS, and finally triple S. The final rank up brings you to EX. Wow, my Haruka is leveling up! She's evolving! Most of her challenges are pretty easy, and requires you to take her to a restaurant. It's really frustrating though because she doesn't tell you where she wants to go, just like a real woman. You just have to walk around till she finds a place she wants to go. And I do mean walk. If you run, she'll be way behind you. She does this swanky ass walk and then says something like, "Boy, I can't wait to frustrate the shit out of Oji-san with my requests," and then you can go into the restaurant or whatever, do her request. If you don't wait for her to say something and just walk into the store, you can't do her request. Also, for the minigame requests, if you fail, you have to leave the building, wait for her to do her swank walk, and then walk back in. You can't just retry. Use a walkthrough for this. You can easily get stuck walking around town, trying to figure out where to go. Oh, and every time she levels up, it unlocks new requests. So you may have walked by a sushi restaurant and she wasn't interested, but now that she leveled up, she wants some sushi. Just use a walkthrough. Otherwise, you have to walk very slowly past every business in Kamurocho and Okinawa every time she levels up. Oh, and some things can only be done at night. So yeah, just slowly walk past every building in Kamurocho and Okinawa at nighttime, daytime, and dusk, and just do that every time she levels up. What the fuck? Just give me a fucking list of what she wants to do. The final challenges to get to EX suck. The last and most difficult one was to get 30 million yen. There's this dude on a bench that's upset he lost everything after the events of Yakuza 2, and he says he's 30 million yen in debt, and now it's our problem, I guess. I scraped up the money after playing Ultimate Tag Match over and over, and this is what happens when you give him the money. Haruka gives you a scarf, which is a shitty gear that doesn't even have any special effects. Yeah, I reverted to my last save. I'm keeping this money. Fuck you, guy. I'm sure I'm gonna get to comment, hey, there's no point in doing Haruka's request. There's not even a trophy for it. So why did you do it in the first place? I don't really care about the trophies. I care about completing the game. I've done Haruka's request in every other game, and usually, it's one of the better parts of completion. I also want to see what the reward is for doing Haruka's request, and I want to earn it. I don't think there's even a video of someone doing this last request anyways, and it feels way better to do it yourself. It's a part of the game. The 30 million yen task calls back to Yakuza 2, so don't complain about it because you don't have to do it isn't really a good defense to me. Also, it's not so much that this is hard, it exposed so many flaws in these minigames. Bowling is okay, but once you try to play perfectly, you see how broken it is. If you don't want to do Haruka's request, that's perfectly fine with me, but I did it and it sucks, so I'm going to complain about it. So, part of the completion list that I haven't mentioned is completing all the Hostess sub-stories, which gives you the lucky binding. You can eat every item and drink every drink for a dragon shirt, which makes leveling up hostesses easier, but it's really tedious because you can't eat if your health is full. At max health, most restaurants would fill my health bar with 3 items on average. Most restaurants have way more than 3 items. You can also only order 1 item at a time, even if you're completely empty on health. I don't know who thought this was a good idea, but if a restaurant has 20 items, you have to order them all 20 different individual times. This sucked. For performing all the heat actions, you get the War God Talisman. This allows you to use any heat move without having heat. I really enjoyed this. There's so many cool heat moves I never would have seen without this. There's one staircase in the whole game, and it's really hard to trigger a fight there. And there's a heat move for throwing someone down the stairs. It's so cool that there's these really specific heat moves that you would completely miss if you didn't know about them. Also, the War God Talisman completely breaks the game. You can just use heat moves over and over on a boss till you win. The last part of the list I wanted to mention is weapon modding completion. Weapon modding sucks. I've always hated gear and weapons in these games. The armor and gear usually just barely increase your defense or have a very minor passive effect. You can't use them in Coliseum or climax battles, which is where the hardest battles are, so why even get used to using them? Same thing with weapons. They break after a few hits, so what's the point? Weapon modding allows you to make different gear and weapons, and you have to make every single one for the completion list. To make a weapon, you need a base piece like a sword or bat, 1 or 2 pieces of material, and a design source. When you're trying to make a weapon, it'll show you if you can make it or not, but it won't show you what parts you need. To see that, you need to find the design that correlates to that mod, of which there are several, and see which parts are needed. It's not like the materials needed are a secret, they just made it extremely inconvenient to see which parts you needed. Oh, and I forgot to mention my favorite part of this game. Inventory management. You have an inventory where everything is stored. Weapons, gear, food, materials, everything. You can only hold like 20 things. After that, you're not allowed to buy items or even look in a shop to see what they have. Enemies in the street constantly drop items that will fill your inventory quick, and if your inventory is full, you have the option to store something in your item box. But not if you're trying to buy something. No, You have to find a save spot, of which there are a few and far between, store your items in the item box, and come back to the shop just to see what the store sells. Keep in mind, weapon modding requires hundreds of items, making this needlessly tedious. Shout out to CRZ for listing all the parts needed for every mod. According to him, the design sources are incorrect for some of those, which is just fantastic. Using CRZ's guide, I was able to get most of these pretty quickly, until I only had a couple left. The item I was missing for these was 2 platinum nails. To my shock and horror, these are a random drop from enemy encounters. That's the only way to get them. I think you need 4 of these total, and after around 150 fights, I only managed to get 2. I looked it up to see if maybe there was some other way to get these, and apparently someone else was in the same position as I was, so this drop is just not very good. When I finally got my last platinum nail, I was at 280 fights. And you want to know what the reward is for doing all of that? A shitty sword I used once. Boy, I sure hope I never see weapon modding in another Yakuza game. I won't go through all the trophies, but I will mention the top 5 hardest. 5 was Master Environmentalist, with 2.4% of the community having this trophy. This is a hidden trophy and it sucks. There's trash on the beach in front of Kiryu's orphanage, and you have to pick up 30 pieces. The catch is, every time the beach loads, 1 item spawns on the beach. Most of the time it's a box. The box has a random item in it, and there's a chance the box can be empty. If the box is empty, it's considered trash, and Kiryu throws it away. Otherwise, it doesn't count towards the 30 pieces of trash. If a box doesn't spawn on the beach, it can spawn a piece of trash. Trash is hard to see and can spawn all the way at the edge of the beach. There is a trick to this. Every time you pick up an item, go over to the fishing rod and start fishing. Immediately quit out and that'll reload the area. This is just as tedious as it sounds. Here's a tip for this. Don't go for the boxes, especially if they're on the edge of the beach. Just reload the area. Yeah, the boxes can be empty, but not enough to justify picking them up every time. Even with this, it'll still take you at least an hour. This trophy had 0 difficulty to it. It's all just tedium. Next is Exposed Dragon. You have to win a hand of Mahjong with only 1 hidden tile. 2.4% people had this. I'm gonna sound like a dick, but this was pretty easy for me. This is the 6th Mahjong completion I've done, so I'm kind of used to it. Also, I played in ranked mode in Kamurocho, which made it easier, I think. Some tips. Don't get rid of a dragon tile. This is the easiest way to get an exposed hand. With a triple dragon, once you get 2 of one of the dragon tiles, get rid of the other dragon or honor tiles if you have them. Now just steal every opportunity you get. At the end of the day, it's just luck, but you should have a few opportunities to get this. This trophy took me 30 minutes, which isn't too bad. Next is Ultimate Challenger. This is essentially climax battles, a bunch of random challenges. I don't have too much to say about these. Some were fun, some were actually impossible with bad RNG. Like there was this one where you have to perform certain actions, but 2 of the actions require you to get knocked down. There's a time limit, and you just have to hope that the enemy will knock you down. Sometimes they wouldn't attack me at all, and some of their attacks don't knock you down. Some of their attacks knock you down, but you can't perform the move you need for some reason. All in all though, these weren't too bad. The final set of challenges are the Ultimate Match, a series of boss fights. The first one requires you to beat all the Okinawa bosses in a row. Number 2 is all Tokyo bosses. 3 is the IF7 bosses. IF7 is a training mode in this game, where you fight these virtual reality bosses. And 4 is 3 Coliseum bosses. The final Ultimate Match is every single story boss in a row, plus the 3 Coliseum bosses, and a couple of IF7 bosses. To get this trophy, you just have to attempt every battle. The kicker is, Ultimate Match number 5 only unlocks after beating the other Ultimate Matches. I struggled so badly on this. It was no joke. I really had to learn boss patterns and the best way to beat each one. I really felt like I was at the limit of my skills. Once I got to the second match, I knew there was no way I could beat the final match against every single boss. I was already planning to write a little section about how I got the trophy, but I couldn't beat the final match. It was just too hard for me. Finally, I beat the second match, and after slowly learning the bosses for parts 3 and 4, it was time to take on the final Ultimate Match. As I started, I realized the bosses that gave me so much trouble were a lot easier now. I knew how to beat them without getting hit. Before I knew it, I was done with the Okinawa bosses. I managed to get to Mine, who I really struggled on, and I beat him, barely getting hit. I knew exactly how to fight him. Before I knew it, I was on to the final 3 bosses, which are the Coliseum bosses. This was my first try and I was already on to the final 3 bosses. This mode gives you 3 weapons and you can use them whenever you want, so I used it here to easily beat Kamiyama. Next was Yonashiro, who's really easy to tiger drop. I couldn't believe it. I was on the final boss, Komaki. I still don't know how to fight Komaki. He's way too quick to get a tiger drop on. If you attack him, he can easily pull a reversal on you, and you can't grab him. I normally rely on being at critical health and spamming Essence of Rolling, like how I beat Valerie Garrett, But after getting this far, I didn't want to take that chance. I spammed all the weapons I had saved for the run and managed to clap him easily. I somehow beat this on my first try. I can't explain how amazing this felt, but this might be my favorite moment in a Yakuza game. Going from not thinking I could beat even 4 bosses in a row, feeling like I was at the limit of my skill, to beating all of them was such an amazing feeling, and made all the bullshit worth it. This is why I complete games. Next, Testament to Strength had 1.9% of the community had this trophy. It's for beating the game on Legend. I'm surprised this is so low, especially with all the stuff you get from completion. From completing the other trophies, Legend is a cakewalk, and the hardest trophy is Minigame Master with 1.6%. Yeah, that makes sense. I've already talked about most of the minigames, and this was definitely the hardest trophy. You have to complete all the minigame requirements in the minigame completion list. I guess I'll talk about Boxchelios, or however you say it, here. It's the only arcade game, other than the crane game, which is also really annoying in this. Probably the worst crane game in any Yakuza. Anyways, Boxchelios is some weird shooter made specifically for this game. You have to shoot a ship's weak spot within a couple seconds, otherwise the timer starts to tick down. You have to reach at least level 50 without running out of time. This was a really weird game that I didn't like. I waited till Haruka asked me to do it. She has the same requirement, and there's no way I'm doing this twice. All in all, Yakuza 0 had the worst completion in my opinion, but 3 was definitely the hardest. 3 took less time, but with all the broken minigames, I have to give it to 3. I know I shit all over this game, but it's mostly because I went from hating this game to seeing how much potential it has. I'm very disappointed in this game as a remaster, as most of the game is worse, because a lot of the features got ruined from this remaster. There's a really solid game underneath all the BS, and it wouldn't be that hard to make 3 one of the best Yakuza games. Obviously the story can't be changed, but a lot of people love the story. Fix the minigames so they actually work properly, let me order as much food as I want at one time, put a cap on how much healing items you can hold, and then make the inventory unlimited, or at least have a separate inventory for materials and weapons if you want to include modding. Change the menus for modding so I can see what items I need without cross-referencing. Fix all the discrepancies in that menu as well. Make the enemies either less block heavy or have them more aggressive. Also, I wasn't really sure where to mention this, but there's lag every time you bring up the return to title menu. You'll need to use this to quit out of a minigame or to return to the title screen, obviously, and you'll use this pretty often. When you bring up the menu, there's like 2 seconds where you can't move the selection to the left, which is of course the one you need. The default selection is on cancel, so when you're quickly trying to quit out, you'll hit cancel instead. It may sound like a non-issue, but this happened to me a lot, and I don't get why this menu had lag to it. I really don't think it would take a lot to make this game a 10 out of 10. Keep in mind, I went from hating this game to desperately wanting Kiwami 3. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, and I'm not giving up hope that we'll get it one day. Goodbye.